This video was sponsored by XTool. Right, so a little while ago I made this EDC multi-tool and it's working out quite nicely. I've been keeping it on my desk, using it for projects also behind the scenes. But there are certain issues with it that I don't really like it has one speed mode. So when I press the button, it just goes full whack straight away. And I also have this drill over here, which is pretty nice and it works pretty well, but it doesn't really have tool storage on there. So this is the only tool storage spot in there and it's quite difficult to press it in. So I'd rather have that be magnetic. Like every time I use a drill, I just take off the bit and I have to replace it with a different one. I just chuck it somewhere, like on the table, and then I lose all those bits, right? And it's not because I'm lazy or anything like that, but it's incredibly frustrating to store the bits back into their casing. And I understand that this is cheap and it's easy to do, but it's so frustrating to get the bits out and push them back in again. It just hurts, you know? And when you make like tool storage fun, you know, with magnets, for example, you're a lot more likely to use it. But the size of it makes it really difficult to put inside of a bag as well. It's like a really cumbersome thing to use. It's pretty ergonomic and that kind of stuff, but there's no reason to not have it ergonomic like this and still have it be usable, right? Because I assume there's just a cable going from the battery to this compartment over here and there's not really anything useful in there. I think what I love most about these projects is actually taking it apart and seeing how stuff works. Because prior to actually doing that, I never really understood how stuff worked and I thought that everything was just really complex and that I couldn't build stuff myself because it seems so difficult or something. But when you break it down into like smaller components, you'll realize that a lot of this stuff is pretty rudimentary at its core. It's got all kinds of sawdust over there. Wow. Okay. So this is all one mechanism, so when you switch the switch, then it just goes to, well, come on, and it goes to the other side. So I think this entire component over here, we can keep this, because if we take that apart, there's a bunch of gears and stuff in there that I don't want to mess with. So there are certain components I would like to reuse. So this is the little switch which, you know, switches it from right around to left around. And I'm attaching it to this little helping hand so that we can 3D scan it in a single go, instead of having to rely on the software side of things to link it together by doing a dual scan. So the helping hand here can also just be really useful for latching onto these cables, so that this entire component can just hang over here and then we can scan this in a single go, because this bottom section over here, we don't need that. We just need to know this top section. So normally I don't really 3D scan the casings, but for this project it might actually be really useful just to, you know, remodel this and recreate this. I think in this case, like 3D scanning the casings and actually modeling around that was somewhat of a mistake, because I had to like reprint it 5 or 6 times. And this is because you're not like thinking yourself, like you're not thinking to yourself like, how's this going to work? You're just like, oh, this is going to work. And then, you know, of course it doesn't work because you did something wrong, or maybe the tolerances are a little bit off, you know? But the way I go about things is basically, you know, I 3D scanned it, or I measured everything up, and then I create a simple holders, and I do pre-check everything. So I print it out on the printer, you know, check if everything fits, and usually I have to do some minor adjustments. And then we have all of those separate components. We can start putting them in the proper position. Like I don't unify it just yet, because I just want to be sure that everything is going to work out in terms of where the cables are going to go, and where all of this stuff is placed in terms of ergonomics as well. So for this first version, the design looked somewhat like one of those stealth planes with a lot of like angular surfaces and that kind of stuff. And I think it looks quite cool. It's like really futuristic, and yeah, I like my tools to look that way. After 3D printing all those components, I pre-check it, so putting all of the stuff in there. And in this case, I did have to cut all of the wires of the drills, because they're kind of going through the casing itself and then linking up later down the line. Alright, so I've pre-checked this little component over here, the side. This is all good, so all functions. Of course, it is a bit of a shame that you can't do it one-handed anymore, like switch from right side to left side. You have to do it with your second hand. But so far it's pretty cool. It's actually like really comfortable to hold in your hand as well, like you can trigger it with the middle finger. I would like to try and make this component out of wood. I think it would be really funny to just try and make it out of like layers of multiplex. So a little while ago, XTool actually reached out and sent over their S1 with the 40-watt module. Actually sent it over with the air purification system. And the desktop that you're seeing it on right now, I built those leg holders with this machine. So, you know, I designed it in Shape 3D and I cut these out on the S1, and that holds all of those legs in place. And especially with that air purification system, you can do these DIY projects in your apartment without bothering your neighbors, for example, and without having to deal with the fumes. It's a pretty innovative system as well. On the website here, you can see how they actually go about this and how long the filters will last. So some of them last quite a long time, like 600 hours on the activated carbon one. And you can actually buy replacements off their website, which is pretty nice. So we'll be testing it in this video as well, checking if it's actually purifying the air. So as you can see, we have everything imported here, and you can just select everything and then choose like at the side here what you want to do. You want to score it, engrave it, or cut it. I chose to cut it, and it bases that off the preset material that I've selected over here. And then up here you have a measure button, so if you press that, then it automatically measures the distance from the wood, so that you don't have to manually adjust the laser till it's focused. So when I click that, it's going to measure it. And so what I really love about this machine is all of the smart features. So you can actually move the laser module to a certain location, and then that gives live feedback to the software itself, whether that be on the iPad or on the computer. And you can actually see where the laser is going to be cutting, right? What I really love about it as well is that it actually connects to the Wi-Fi. So you don't need to connect it to your computer, right? You don't need a laptop nearby or anything like that. You can have it in a different room and send the files to the machine via the iPad, for example. And then when you're there, then you just have to press the button at the front and it starts to cut. So while we were cutting out those pieces, I grabbed my air quality monitor just to check if it's actually doing a good job with the air purification system. And what we're looking for is that top number over there, that's the PM 2.5, because we're cutting with wood. Usually if you're doing this with an open laser cutter, you'll see that jump up to like 800, for example. And here it's just at a steady 12, which is really great. That means it's filtering out pretty much everything. When we hold it at the back of the device, it seems to actually be cleaning the air, but that might actually also be because there's a lot of wind over there. And it's not like there's not a ton of smoke coming off this thing. You can definitely see in this shot over here how much smoke is actually being pulled in that air purification system over there. So I've left some links down below if you want to check it out, and special thanks to XTool for sponsoring this video. So in this case I made it really difficult for myself as well, and I'm not entirely sure why I did that, but yeah, I wanted the lines to just look like a skateboard slide, so to say, and it might have been better to actually cut it in a long length so that you have longer pieces, but then it would be less cut. In this case, yeah, I had to like glue it all together, and it took about half an hour. It's not that bad. Actually, it looks quite cool like this as well, because the rest is so clean. This is really like a choice or something. So after this I sanded it down with some sandpaper, and it looks like I'm doing this really roughly, but I'm actually quite careful in these shots. Like I was really afraid of like damaging it somehow, and one wrong move and it would just snap into little bits. So I sanded it down just enough to where you can still see some of the burn marks from the laser cutter. I think that will give it a nice, rugged look, so to say. So this was kind of a pre-check to see like, is this a feasible method for building stuff? So I've been thinking about making an entire EDC tool out of just wood using this method. I was doing this pretty carefully because I was quite afraid that the drill press would just like, hook onto it and then fly it around and then break it into little pieces again. So this is one of the first projects actually where I remembered to use like those little inserts, which I keep forgetting to do, and I don't know why, but I bought them like, I don't know, 7 months ago, and this is the first time I actually remembered like, oh, I can like, make the hole a little bit bigger, use like a soldering iron to push those into it. So if you enjoyed the video so far, then definitely also leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. So I just want to give a special thanks to the Patreon supporters on Patreon as well. I really appreciate it, and your support goes a really long way. If you would like to download any of the files and that kind of stuff, I upload those over there. In terms of the cables, I cut those in half earlier on in the build, and now I'm just attaching some extra wire and using some heat shrink to hold them together. So I think doing the wiring actually took the most amount of time in this entire project. Like the singular task, the CAD drawing took like 8 hours, but it was incredibly boring to do. So in terms of the content on my channel, I don't really do it for the end result, although sometimes I am a little bit disappointed when I finish a project and then I realized a bunch of new stuff, and then I immediately like have to continue with the project to, because you get a new idea and that kind of stuff. And the idea with this is that it's replaceable, right? So if we need it to store something different, we can just take this one off and then put something new in there. Whoa! Stop messing with it. Dude, I was not expecting this to be so difficult. No. But yeah, this one turned out really quite awesome. I really enjoy it, and I really enjoy the form factor change as well. I'm a lot less likely to hold it in front of the camera when I'm doing a shot, which is a very niche issue. I totally understand that. But yeah, I had that a lot of times where the battery would be hanging like over here, and I'd be drilling into something, and the battery just blocked the shot completely. So it's a user-friendly drill essentially. But I do have a lot of upgrades planned for this thing. I'm pretty much continuing this project straight away. I want more like bit storage and drill bit storage as well. And I'd like to separate the handle so that you can twist it into this position and still have it be usable for, you know, drilling into a wall, for example. So definitely stay tuned for that. That's probably coming out next week. So that was it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it gave you some inspiration for your own stuff. Hopefully see you in the next one.